Now, actually loading the film. Your film will come in a box that will resemble, you see this is marked with junk all over it, so it's not important film at all. It's out of date, well out of date film that we can play around with. Now, when you get your film, it will have adhesive tape attaching it to the rest of it. You need to peel that adhesive tape off, and it's always best to cut the end off of it so it's not got any adhesive left on the end of the film. As I mentioned before, I think these are daylight spools. You can load the camera in subdued light. Obviously strong sunlight is not recommended, but subdued light is perfectly okay. Once you've taken that adhesive tape off and you've trimmed the end, now when we get the film here at University Derby, it's quite considerably cheaper to buy it on 400-foot cores. So it's spooled off onto these 100-foot cores. It is possible that the film's been put on the wrong way. And if the film has been put on the wrong way, the sprocket holes will be the wrong way round and it won't load. So it's always good practice to hold up a spool in front of you so it's hanging down to your right and the sprocket holes need to be away from you. It's always good practice just to check that. Okay, so what we need to do now, we've set the camera 24 frames per second. I'll just wind it again. You'll get used to winding a Bolex. You need to wind a Bolex constantly, basically, because you can't do much without winding a Bolex. There's nothing worse than running out of puff, running out of power when you're midway through loading. So you then need to close the loop formers. Yeah. You can see there are arrows here. There's an arrow at the top which shows you which way the film comes off. The film always goes on the top spindle, comes down through the mechanism and is taken up that way. See that arrow there? It's taken up on the take-up spool that way. So we take our film. We place it on the square spindle on the top, and it clicks into place like so. Yeah. You then, I know I would have already trimmed this, or you would have already trimmed this to trim the adhesive tape off. But down the bottom here of the magazine, there is a trimmer to trim off the end of the film, and it's always good to trim off that first bit of film. This being old film, I can feel it's got a crease in it there. I need to trim off some more, like that. And it's always good to trim off a substantial amount of film, like that. And the emulsion will always stick to a wet finger to get it out of the magazine. Yeah. And you'll see the important reason for trimming it down there is because it's got an angled cut, which is most important. So I can just see a hair that I missed there, so I'm going to take that out like that. Now then, the secret here now is how much film you have between your forefinger and your thumb. That's too much and that's too little. You have to have just the right amount to poke the film in that position. And it's going to be underneath the lip of the first bit of spindle mechanism there. And once you've got that, you run the camera and the film pops out the other side of the gate. Yeah. You need to make sure there's at least a foot that protrudes from the other side of the gate and the mechanism. Once you've got that far, it's best to open the loop former so you don't forget, like that. So you've loaded the film through the gate, you've opened the loop formers. You then need to anchor it in the take-up spool. It's got a little slit in the middle of it there, and that's where you had to poke the film so it anchors, and you can feel it with your nail there. Now, You poke the film in the little slit in the middle of that daylight spool, and it's taken up, as you can see, that way, the way of the arrow there. Now, a common mistake when loading it, can you see that lever? Chrome lever there, that tells the camera how much film is left, basically. Some people load it so the film is the wrong side of that, like that. That's not good. So it has to be on the inside of that lever. And the bottom spool pops into place like that. Now, once you've got this far, you need to run it to make sure, just for a short while, just to make sure that it is going to run okay. So, and it does, yeah. So, the next thing you will need to do is to close the lid. Okay. Now, once you've got this far, you will need to run it until the footage counter here, which is now pointing to FT, representing feet, of course, you need to run it until it says 0. And all that does, it runs through the gate of the camera all the film that has been fogged. And of course, the first layer of film will have been fogged by handling. Yeah. So you need to run it, keeping an eye on this little window, this little circular window, until it reaches 0. And you feel like you're wasting film because it's expensive. There we are. So I've reached the 0 there.